Hi, welcome to our first lecture for world history, done via my phone. I'm gonna use my phone, like I mentioned earlier, at least for this first week, because I understand how to upload everything to YouTube. So my goal is for this lecture to be under 10 minutes. I thought that would be easy, and then I did a practice run and talked for longer than 10 minutes. So um, if I move quickly, that's what the office hours are for, and that is what my email's for. So feel free, please, please, please ask me questions because this is hard. We're dealing with religion, as I hinted at yesterday, and religion's tricky because it's personal and most people associate with some sort of religion or belief and struggle to understand people that are different than them. And that's normal. That's not wrong or bad. It's normal to have a hard time understanding people that are different than you. And we're going to deal with a couple of big religions as far as making up the modern Middle East, making up a lot of history, and that is Judaism and Islam. So I give this warning again. I am talking to you about historical Judaism and Islam. I'm not saying I believe it. I'm not saying that you should believe it, and I'm not saying I don't or you shouldn't. I'm saying this is what they've believed historically. And it's important to understand that as you navigate the Middle East, this unit, and as you go out in the world as a global educated citizen. So let's get started on this lecture. I'm going to do my best to kind of tell you where I'm at on the slideshow as we go. So, Introduction to Judaism. Let's get lecturing. I don't know what to tell you to write down. This isn't a test like you've had before, right? We're not doing multiple choice or stimulus. You need to have basic understandings of everything I give you because I'm just giving you the bare minimum in this new online world. I say online world a lot. I've noticed as I've watched my videos. So, as I'm talking through these, I would recommend writing down the main ideas, summarizing my main points. A few times I'll say this is really important, so make sure you get those down. But I don't know how to guide you through notes, so just know you're going to have to moderate that yourself. So I'm going to jump in on slide 3. Judaism is. So Rabbi Harold Kushner, in his book To Life, The History of Judaism, describes being Jewish as, quote, a 4,000-year-old tradition with ideas about what it means to be human and how to make the world a holy place. So rabbi is roughly equivalent to pastor or priest or bishop. It is a person who is studied in the Hebrew/Jewish Talmud, which is their holy book, Old Testament, or at least the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And they've spent their life studying this and teaching it. And this rabbi defines Judaism as a way to figure out how to be a person, how to have a relationship with God, how to celebrate and sanctify life. Really, if you're Jewish, if you are religiously Jewish, it makes up your whole worldview. And I want to clarify that, as I said, religiously Jewish. You can be, and hopefully you saw this in the video that you just watched, you can be Jewish and not believe in God. Because there are 2 types of Jewish. There's cultural or ethnic Jew, and there is religious or traditional Jew. If you are an ethnic Jew, it just means you're born Jewish. It's passed down on your mom's side. If your mother's Jewish, you are ethnically Jewish, and that's your ethnicity. It's your ancestors, it's your heritage. Now, you can be born Jewish and reject it, and therefore you're only ethnically or culturally, but you can also convert to Judaism or be born Jewish and be religious and be a religious Jew. So that's confusing. It can mean 2 different things. It can mean your ethnicity or it can mean your religion. So as you're looking at slide 4, this is Old Testament stuff. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about this because when I give this lecture in person, this slide lasts like 2 class periods because there are so many questions. I'll just suffice it to say, and I'm getting ahead of myself. I think it's coming up on the next slide. If you're familiar with the Bible, Christians, which most of you have experience or connection to Christianity, Christians believe in the complete Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the biggest difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament is the New Testament has Jesus. And if you're a Christian or have a Christian background, like that's how you've been raised. Like Jesus is a big part of religion. But if you're Jewish, you just believe in the Old Testament. And Jesus isn't in the Old Testament. The Old Testament has a prophecy that there will be a Savior who's coming to save the world from their sins. And Jews believe that Savior has not come yet. So their religious book ends with, I should know this, whatever the last book of the Old Testament is, that's going to bug me. I'll look that up later. Their Bible ends with the end of the Old Testament. Christians believe in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and that's one of the biggest differences between them. So what you're seeing on slide 4 is some basics of Old Testament. Abraham, who is the patriarch of Jews, all of his lineage is what makes up an ethnic Jew. Moses, if you're familiar with the story, Prince of Egypt, the Disney movie depicts it, of Moses being left in the river in a basket and the Pharaoh finding him and him being raised as a Pharaoh's son. And then when he's older, God speaks to him and he asks the Pharaoh to let his people go. His people are Jews. So when Moses takes those people on his trek through the wilderness, this is the part I wasn't going to get into because it gets complicated, but Moses is looking to bring the Jewish people to the sacred land, the Holy Land, the land promised to them by God. He is not successful. That's, again, a whole different tangent. But that is, this slide 4 is just like Old Testament, who's who in the Old Testament, and the basic background of Jews. Slide 5, I've got 3 minutes. I'm trying to keep this under 10 minutes. Okay, slide 5, Jews believe that in monotheism, mono meaning one, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism all believe in the same God. And a lot of times my students are really shocked by that. Because all three religions believe in the Old Testament. Jews, Muslims, and Christians believe in the Old Testament. So if you are Christian, we in the Western world call God, God. Jews, Yahweh, and Muslims, Allah, but it's all the God of the Old Testament. And there's one God, and that's really important. The Torah, the Talmud, are the first 5 books of the Bible. And those books are very sacred to Jews, and it's where they get most of the laws that they follow, which is not the next slide. Okay, slide 6. Slide 7 is about the laws. Slide 6, this is going to sound a little bit like Africa, where like slaves, by means of the slave trade, African people were spread throughout the world, and now Pan-Africanism is to bring them back. Jews have been spread out, dispersed. Diaspora is the highlighted word on slide 6. This group of 15 to 16 million people have been spread throughout the world by persecution in the Middle Ages. They've been spread out due to the Holocaust and other levels of hatred, and they want to come back together, and they believe when their Savior comes, they will be brought back together. The list on the bottom is just like what type of Jews exist. And like Christianity, you have like Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian. Jews, you have Orthodox, Modern, and then the list continues. All right, slide 7. In the Torah, there are those first 5 books of the Bible. There are 613 commandments that if you're Jewish, you have to follow. And if you're traditional religious Jewish, an example is kosher. To be kosher means that, well, one example of kosher meat means meat has been processed in a certain way. And like Jews don't eat pig. They don't eat shellfish. They don't eat any animal that like revels in mud or feces because they call it dirty. But even the meat they do eat has to be processed in a certain way to be following the law. All right, last slide. I'm at like 10 minutes, and this is probably the most important slide. So how does Judaism relate to Christianity? So There's actually a lot more in common between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam than most people think, and Islam being the one that really throws people, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. Judaism predates Christianity. When Jesus was on this earth, the man or the religious figure, he started this movement known as Christianity. And a lot of the early Christian converts had previously been Jewish, and they followed Jesus's teaching and switched to Christianity. I mean, it's on the next point. Like, Jesus was Jewish, his apostles were Jewish. Like, Judaism was a prevalent religion at the time that Christianity began. Jews look at Jesus as a good person, great ideas, but not a Messiah. Not the Messiah, I should say. They are still waiting for their Messiah. They are still waiting for the person to come to earth. And it's not like Christians use this word salvation, that Jesus came to save them. Jews are looking for a Messiah to come and bring them back together and politically unite them. And he, she, it. Genders are weird when you're talking about a God. But the Messiah for the Jews, according to Jews, isn't here yet. They're still waiting on the Messiah. So that was a lot. I am over 10 minutes, but not as badly as I was in my first try. So this is hard, big stuff. Office hours today from 1 to 2. Today, when you watch this, being Tuesday the 24th. Also Thursday. And then my email. Like, my email's open. I hope you know you can reach out to me if you need anything. I'll see you soon.